Well, hi, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm Linda Cass, and Gramercy Books is honored to bring you tonight's program. It's a unique live and live streamed poetry program featuring Respect the Mic, an expansive, moving anthology representing 20 years of poetry from students and alumni of Chicago's Oak Park River Forest High School in Spoken Word Club. So for the next hour, there will be both live and streamed components. The evening will feature Respect the Mic co-editors Peter Kahn and Hanif Abdurraqib, and former spoken word member Steven Waddell, as well as readings by poets from this moving anthology. And we're going to leave about 20 minutes at the end for your questions. And I want to address the online audience for a moment, because we want you too to participate in the question and answer period of the program. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box, and it's located at the bottom of your laptop or desktop screen. And if you like a question, you will upvote it, and so it will appear at the top. You know, we just want you to ask your questions, and we will include them at the end of the program. Now I'm going to introduce Peter Kahn. He's co-editor of Respect the Mic. A former Chicago social worker, Peter has been an English teacher since 1994 and a spoken word educator since 2003 at Oak Park River Forest High School. His students can be seen in the films Louder Than a Bomb and America to Me. Peter's a founding member of the London poetry collective Malika's Kitchen. He co-founded the London Teenage Poetry Slam, and as a visiting fellow at Goldsmiths University of London, he created the Spoken Word Education Training Program. Peter earned his MA in English education from The Ohio State University, student taught at Columbus East High School, and taught for the Young Scholars Program. He was a featured speaker at the National Council of Teachers of English's annual convention and runner-up at the NCTE and Penguin Random House Maya Angelou Teacher Award for Poetry. Along with Patricia Smith and Ravi Shankar, he edited the Golden Shovel anthology, New Poems Honoring Gwendolyn Brooks, which we were really thrilled to feature here at Gramercy. And Peter's 2020 poetry collection, Little Kings, has poems featured in the London Guardian and the Forward Book of Poetry. So Peter, I'll give you the floor. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Great to see you all. Great to see you all at home or not see you all at home, but to know you're out there. Some other thank yous. Thank you to Linda and Nikki and Debbie and Marcy and David from Gramercy for having us and going through a very complicated process to make tonight work. To Rachel Sonis and Penguin Workshop team, Hannah Brettasani, our agent from Frederick Agency, all the writers who visited OPRF over the years and taught us and inspired us, including Tim Siebels, who I believe hopefully is logged in and is watching from home. Hanif and our co-editors, Dan Sully Sullivan and Franny Choi, and the Oak Park and River Forest High School community, the poets, the teachers, the community at large have been so supportive of this program. We should have, I don't see him here yet, but Merrick Moore Fields, who's in the anthology, is visiting Columbus. Maybe we'll get to hear from him during the Q&A. So a little bit of context. This book has 76 poems in it. The youngest poets were 14 when they wrote the poem. About 40% of the poets in here were in high school when they wrote the poem. We started this project 3.5 years ago, and here we are finally holding this thing. The oldest was probably my co-editor, who was about 35 at the time, Dan Sully Sullivan. So nice range. Some of the people in this book hated poetry at the beginning and fell in love with it, and it changed their lives. Others, right off the bat, they enjoyed it. So it's arranged that way. We've got Kara Jackson, who was National Youth Poet Laureate. We got R.C. Davis and Natalie Richardson, who are national poets through the Scholastic Arts program. I'll talk a little bit about our most famous person, Iman Shumpert, We got Langston Kerman, who can't be viewing right now because he's in Washington, D.C. doing stand-up. He's going to have a show on Peacock with Chris Redd and others starting March 11th, I believe. You should check that out, or March 10th. And we're really proud of this. We think the work holds up on the page just as it did on the stage. And yeah, we're excited to be here and to celebrate this book. So with that in mind, I'm going to introduce my former student here, Steve Waddell. So I first met Steve when he was 14 years old, sitting in Mr. Noble's freshman English class, honors English class. And Steve went on to win his in-class poetry slam and then made it to finals. And we were able to get him into spoken word club, but he had to juggle around. He was a two-sport athlete, volleyball and basketball. So we didn't get him as much as we wanted him to. Now I have permission to tell this next part of Steve's bio. So Steve basically sabotaged himself academically in high school. So he went from honors track, then got bumped down, then got bumped down. And frankly, we didn't know if he was going to graduate high school on time. And that brings me to our most famous person in the book, Iman Shumpert. So when Iman Shumpert was a rookie with the New York Knicks, they went on strike and he hadn't even played a game yet. So he came back to Oak Park and reached out to me and said, hey, you want me to come to spoken word? I'm in town. I said, of course. He had just signed a deal with Adidas for $1 million. So he was decked out in Adidas top to bottom and everybody were in awe of him, right? So he says, PK, is there anybody you want me to talk to in particular? And I said, yes, please. See that guy over there? That's Steve Waddell. You probably know his older brother. I think you might have played basketball with him. Steve needs a kick in the butt. He's so smart and talented, but he's not doing well in school. He says, I got you. He says, PK, I tried. Remember that? Now, fortunately, Steve went on, he went to junior college, played basketball there, and poetry came to the rescue in the form of a professor named Daniel Barutsky, who some of you might know because he went on to win the National Book Award. And Daniel lit that fire for Steve, and Steve eventually transferred to the University of Illinois, won an Academy of American Poets Award while he was there, graduated from there, went on to earn a master's degree from Iowa State, and now resides in the Buckeye State and is the director of learning at a local high school here, Alternative High School. So I'm very proud of you, Steve. You're one of the nicest people I know, and I'm so glad you're here. So please give a warm welcome to Steve Waddell.
Thank you very, very much, Mr. Kahn. Yes, sir. And, definitely love PK. I appreciate him for offering me this opportunity. Just to be in this space is just really, really cool. So I'm really excited to be here. Within this book, PK talked a little bit about how I've had my times to try to do better and things like that. I was actually supposed to be in this book and the last book, but I didn't actually end up submitting poetry. So I wanted to first just kind of talk about what it was like for me being in the spoken word club. I would say being in the spoken word club is like being in a war. And it's a war for, it was a war for me because it was a war with me just fighting. It was like being in a war where you're guaranteed victory, but you can only win if you keep fighting. So for me, the war was a war of my emotions. How vulnerable do I wanted to be with what I disclosed? A war of writing and performing something that was worth talking about, but also a war with PK, who would always send back my lines talking about their cliche or find a specific incident. I'm like, dude, these are bars. Do you want them or not? This is fire. What are you talking about? So that war was something that I really appreciate being a part of the spoken word club and really having PK kind of take me under his wing time and time again. You mentioned a little bit about Daniel Barutsky, but really what kind of changed the trajectory of my experience with education was just going to community college and seeing how I had teammates who were taking like classes, like remedial classes, like English 99, English 98, who were trying their best. But me, I was like smart enough to do the work, but I just never would apply myself. So when I started a tutoring program for my teammates, that's what really kind of ignited that educational, I guess, desire that PK always kind of saw within me. So I always appreciate PK. I want to do my round of applause for it. So I believe we're going to share Kamara Brown's poem.
Yeah.
All right, do you want?
Yeah, so that's gonna come on and then we'll talk about it after.
Absolutely. So I'll let Kamara kind of go over the poem.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kamara Brown, and I wrote the poem titled Taking Down a Confederate Flag in Lincoln Park on June 27th, 2018. And this poem is sort of a literal and lyrical narration of an incident where some friends and I saw a Confederate flag sticker stuck to a no parking sign in Lincoln Park. And it sort of describes the process of us trying to take it down. And after that, it felt really emotional. I felt really emotional. And I probably wrote this down in the days or weeks directly afterwards. And sort of, I wrote it down sort of to have a record, you know, of what happened and how I felt. And now looking back on it and thinking about it, I see it as like a very, very, very small part of, you know, a genre of protest tradition where Black people, you know, protest symbols, monuments that celebrate racist and imperial violence all over the world and in the US. So the poem also tries to think about the emotional toll, so like complicated emotional feelings of like living a day-to-day life and having these encounters with brutal symbols. Yeah, so this is the poem. It's titled Taking Down a Confederate Flag in Lincoln Park on June 27th, 2018. Alex offers to kneel so I can stand on her, and Lee cannot hold me. She asks if I feel comfortable sitting on her shoulders. I showered this morning, but my inner thighs are moist with trapped heat from a sticky afternoon, crossed under a billowing skirt on a sticky day, but it has to come down. So I climb on her shoulders as she squares. She shakes as we rise. Her sister has her hand in the under of her shoulders, just in case. We are quite the tree. Families walking on the grassy path or driving to meet their friends glance and name us. Two late 20-ish white Jewish women holding up a mid 20-ish Black woman. Hands on my sinking ass and shins. Again, I hear my mom nagging from the magical corner of the kitchen I could never find. She's whispering, "Put some elbow grease in it," as I clean a cast iron skillet with who knows what leftovers. Up here, it smells like barbecue, exhaust, and some freshly rolled grass. Even though I never drink beer, I scrape with the metal can opener on my key ring. I scrape and drag with grease and a prayer I didn't make. Keys ringing like wind chimes in a dishwasher. I scrape the flag off the no parking sign, start with a pattern. I scrape in a thick X, stretching the stars jagged and spill their white in the empty blue space. Then I peel off the red in each of the 4 triangles until all that's left is a white 3x5 rectangle scratched white. No red, no blue left. At some point, I start picking at the thread of colorful traces. They look white, but I feel them lifted like thin, sticky scabs, an annoying price tag. It's so quiet up there, except for the dull pluck of my nails against the now white sticker. My wrists ache, but I don't stop till I hear, "You think that's good?" Obviously not. "Are you okay? Do you need anything? You seem so calm." I say, "Most days I feel like I'm holding back a wave. Even now, there is so much more I should say. Alex asks, how would it feel to let it crash? I don't know if the question offers a safety pin or a boat. We walk down the path where others passed us. It is so humid. My thighs say thank you for the breeze, and the water builds up in me. Some goddamn metaphysical dilemma. No longer embarrassed by my sweat and its bitter breath. Thank you.
So apart from the fact that I love Kamara Brown, I've been knowing her for almost over 20 years now. She's absolutely an amazing person, but I've been living with this piece for probably about 2 months now, just kind of thinking about how significant it was. And when I think about the poem, there's three kind of key components that kind of stood out to me, which is why I selected this poem. The first of which being proximity. So in the story or a poem about taking down a Confederate flag, Kamara puts the image of a tree, but the tree is two white women. Atop the tree is a black woman. In the poem about a Confederate flag, that image was very, that was a really pungent image for me to be thinking about taking down a Confederate flag and then the image of a tree and atop the tree being a black person. In addition to that, I think the second point will be tradition. So when you talk about Black traditions and things of that nature, a clean kitchen is really, really huge. And typically the Black women in the house clean the kitchen. So when Kamara talks about the cleaning the cast iron skillet and putting elbow grease in it and talking about leftovers, cleaning out leftovers, is a Confederate flag not leftovers of American society? So those kind of images all coupled within this seemingly mundane poem about taking down a Confederate flag, but really having these really sharp and succinct images really kind of stuck out to me. And then the last part of it was this metaphysical dilemma. There was a quote by James Baldwin: to be Black and conscious in America is to be enraged at all times. And to be Black is a metaphysical dilemma. So I think with Kamara in this poem and just the way that she kind of put these images and these kind of really deep historical Black instances coupled with the deep historical Black instance of overcoming and subverting racism was very, 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 very powerful to me. So thank you, Kamara, for sharing this poem, and thank you for PK for letting me speak about it. So thank you all so much.
Just a little bit of context, right? Why we're watching a video. The reason we're watching a video is we couldn't fly Kamara, bless you, Kamara in for this event, bless you. We couldn't fly in Asia for this event. Basically, I flew in from Chicago for this event, and that was going to be it. And Steve, fortunately, is in Columbus, as is Hanif, right? But we want this book to be an absolute game changer in the classroom. And as part of that, we created a website. We hired someone named Ellington Bramwell, who's phenomenal, to create this website for us. And of the 76 contributors, I think 68 provided a video like we just saw, and we're going to see 2 more of. We also have writing prompts. We have impact statements about how poetry and spoken word has impacted their lives, favorite poets and lyricists, all sorts of additional resources. So we're sort of showcasing one of those resources with these videos. With that said, I'd like to introduce from Chicago, Asia Calcagno.
I'm going to read you my poem, and I'll tell you a little bit about my writing process and my intention of writing what I wrote. The title is Password Security Questions. Ask me the right questions to know I am always afraid. What is your mother's maiden name? Name she refused to keep. A throat-stabbing bone, another cave in her stomach. Name anchored to her feet and wings threaded through the back. Call her old name, a stack of mail on a dead mother's table which whispers, come home, you nameless fool. What is your father's middle name? A shovel and spade cracking against rock. Some name I know, but wish I didn't. Who I dare call him, who I dare speak, supposedly biblical. I suppose a saint, a son of someone, a son of a gun. The carpenter who built a wooden child he couldn't upkeep. What city were you born in? A conditional war zone, a consequence of blessings. The place where I bleed and hose myself bloodless in my front yard. City where women who ride trains place pretty razors under a tongue and buoy their hearts above water. On what street did you grow up? The corner of Austin and Chicago, the corner of Madison and Menard, the vacant lot of Trumbull and Franklin, always down the street from a corner store, a block from the garden house. I shop for men who wave and wink from laundromats, barbershop windows, and food and liquors, where I bust his head clean open like a coconut and call it my defense. I guess a place where the wind teaches me how to pack and go. What does your name mean? Sunrise, east. I imagine the sun orbits my earth. I imagine everyone calls me the truth and not a lie. If we're on the block, they think I mean honey, baby, red, stubborn. My mama calls me sugar, but my daddy calls me nothing. Call me a child in every one of my years, with small fists wrapped around my father's first drink. In a dream, I find myself standing alone in a blizzard with mean wind blowing into my ears. I echo, what do you call your life? I answer to myself, something special, the one I'm always running from. So the intention of writing this piece is I wanted to write the things that scare me. For me, this poem feels like an origin story, my origin story. And in grad school, there was a professor who was telling me I was holding back and encouraging me to open up a bit more. And this was my way of opening up with boundaries. Sometimes we write about the truth or we write about the things that scare us. Sometimes it's really hard to do so and just write it blatantly and openly. And for me, utilizing the vehicle of the password security questions was a fun way for me to try to get to the deep-rooted answers of very simple questions. A lot of these questions don't necessarily have a really clear answer. And I think I'm fine with that. And I think sometimes when we write about ourselves and we write to get to know ourselves, actually, sometimes we don't always have a really clear understanding of
Besides the poem, which I'll talk about, writing to get to know ourselves is just beautiful sentiment, right? So in terms of my favorite poetry, there's going to be story, there's going to be surprise, there's going to be craft. And this has an abundance of all of those, which is part of why I love it. And we taught it to all of our sophomores. So 850 students studied this poem at our school the first semester and the beginning of second semester. So one of the things we talk about in terms of craft in all good writing, right, is showing versus telling. And she does a beautiful job of that. So we would ask students right off the bat, who does she seem to have a better relationship with, her mother or her father? So students, mother or father? Mother, right? So then we ask the students, well, what's the evidence? How does she show that to us? Because she never says, my mother's a better parent than my father is, right? But it's littered throughout the poem. So there's the image of the carpenter. There's the image of her father drinking while holding her finger as a baby. There's my mother calls me sugar. My father calls me nothing, right? So it has all of those elements, and there's so much to dig into it. In terms of the surprise of it, one of my colleagues, Dr. Kahn, brought up the point that it starts out with real password security questions, right? But then it becomes more and more almost absurdist in terms of the questions and the answers. And she gives very few straightforward answers, right? But we learn about her and we learn stories about her life. And as she said, she wanted to be something of an origin story. And I think it operated beautifully as such. What I want to say about Asia is somewhat like Steven. Asia started high school a wayward student. She didn't care about school, and she found herself through poetry and through spoken word club. She went on to become a posse scholar and get a full ride to Connecticut College, went on to get her MFA from Bennington College, was the graduation speaker, and now she is the director of programming for 826 Shy, a literary organization in the city. She has a manuscript that will come out hopefully in the next year or two. She's going to make her mark on the poetry world. So I'm very proud to have her in the anthology and to know her as I've gotten to know her over the years. Speaking of making the mark, I get to introduce my co-editor, Hanif Abdurraqib, who's made his mark, not just in poetry, but all sorts of genres as a writer. As I said at our first launch, I got to hear of Hanif through my buddy from England. There's Merrick Moore Fields, who's in the anthology. I got to hear about Hanif the summer of 2016. I was back in London, where I'd lived over the years, and was hanging out with my friend, the great poet Raymond Antrobus. And every summer we would trade, who should we be checking out? And I don't know why I hadn't heard of you at that point, but I hadn't heard of you at that point, Hanif. And Raymond showed me a video and he said, I love teaching this guy. And sure enough, we start teaching one of Hanif's poems to all of our freshmen. And then I invited Raymond from England and Hanif from Providence at the time to come be guest judges and performers for our freshman Poetry Slam finals. And they graciously agreed to do so. And then they led a master writing workshop that was transformational for all of us. And then we've become friends ever since. I've been teaching his poems. I just taught with Spoken Word Club one of your poems last week, and students are just in awe. So it's beautiful to be friends with somebody whose poems you teach. And I've been fortunate to be able to do that. Hanif is quite accomplished. He was a finalist for the National Book Award. He is a finalist for the National Book Critics Circle Award. He's the winner of the Lenore Marshall Poetry Prize, the MacArthur Genius Grants, the United States Artist Fellowship, and most recently a Carnegie Medal. I'd like to see if you have all this, like you don't have wallpaper, you just have these awards, because it would cover all over the wall. Hanif is a humble hero and role model to so many of us, and I'm honored that he chose to be a co-editor for this. Please give a warm Buckeye welcome.
It'd be funny if I had the awards as wallpaper. The funny thing is I never know where they are. I dried my National Book Award medal, which is not a joke. The dryer was rattling really loud a few weeks ago. I was like, what's going on? And I opened it and the National Book Award medal was in the dryer. I don't keep track of them as much as I should, I suppose. It was an honor to get to work on this anthology, and not only to get to work on it, there's one thing that I'm used to as a writer, and it's the part of the process where the book transfers from kind of a mass of ideas to a mass of language to something that is solid. And I'm used to that for myself. I'm used to all of that process I feel for myself. But to get to do it with this much different language from this many different writers, from this many different eras, it kind of reshaped my brain around what making a book could look like. And there's something that the thing that I keep going back to with this book is the amount of time it spans. It's difficult, I think, to talk about lineage in concrete ways because many of us are connected, perhaps by a single thread, but those connections lead us in many different directions. And to have this book and to have spent time with this club that Peter Kahn has created was a real wonderful thing for me. I talk all the time about how I didn't write in high school. I didn't even write in college. I mostly slept in college, like right across the street there at Capitol. And when I come across stuff like this, you know, my first impulse is to be envious. Like, gosh, I didn't have anything like this when I was young. But instead, I feel really grateful to have come to this work now, because in some ways, I'm still very much the eager young person who wanted to write like this when I was a teenager and just didn't have access to it. And so to come to this now excites me greatly, and to get to spend time with these poems made me a better poet. I'm thankful for that. With that in mind, we're gonna play Riley's poem. You know, I guess I'll talk about it after, but we're gonna play Riley Maloney's poem now.
The last long-term relationship I had was when dinosaurs roamed my world. I removed Minnesota memories from my 5-year-old brain. I'm the new kid who knows more about Star Wars than holding conversations. I learn everyone's name in Miss Ingstrom's kindergarten class, and I've decided I need to find the person I like. Her name is Magali, and she isn't from around here. The world she comes from is some far-off desert planet called Mexico. She'd build my confidence up like Duplo. Now I'm more okay with making what our teacher would call inappropriate choices. I'm not as worried about getting to the dinosaur toys first. But the jungle gym is full of predators, and if you talk different, you're easy prey. My friends would swoop down from the monkey bars, scuttle out from under the turtle. They ask her questions, the usual kind. What toys do you like? How far can you swim? Can you jump over a wall? The biggest thing kindergarten taught me is how children can be just as prejudiced as their fossilized parents. I try to protect her, but I'm not the big dinosaur I'm pretending to be. I'm just a kid, so is she. We're too young to learn how hateful the world can be. But Ice disagrees with me and doesn't think she's worth keeping. They taught us division early, and I am the remainder. The only memory the class has was the way she talked. The only memory I have of her is the gift she left me, her little dinosaur. When I was writing this, I wanted to capture this feeling of helplessness, but also this bit of guilt that sort of hovers over me through a lot of my life. A lot of people I know and care about go through like all these really terrible things, and I just feel really powerless to do anything about it. So I went back and I tried to find one of the earliest points in my life where I really felt that. So Magali was a friend of mine in kindergarten, and we'd sort of act like we were boyfriend and girlfriend in the way that kindergartners would understand that type of relationship. But shortly after the school year ended, her family was forced to go back to Mexico. And at the time, I didn't really know what was happening. I was just sad that my friend had to leave, but as I got older, I did find out what was going on, and I remembered like a lot of the things my classmates would say about her, and the whole situation was really a lot worse than I realized. So I know that my perspective on these types of stories doesn't really matter as much as the people who were actually forcibly removed like Magali was, but I still wanted to try and share another story about something that is still happening in this country every day. You know, like no matter who is in charge, the callous mechanism in our system that deported Magali and thousands of other people is still there, and it's still being left unaddressed.
I love Riley's poem for a couple of reasons. The one I want to focus in on is a thing that I talk about when I talk to particularly young writers who are writing with memory, writing towards memory, like writing backwards as a forward-facing person. So like being a 18-year-old writing about your young self. What I really loved about this poem is that there is an awareness of the youth and childlike wonder within it. The poem is both kind of whimsical and playful, but also very aware of its adult speaker. You know, and so we're not like embodying Riley's 5-year-old self. Riley the adult self is reflecting on Riley's kindergarten self. And that allows for that kind of balance of playfulness and whimsy, but also kind of very distinct clarity of message. Another thing I really liked about it is that it kind of works around the edges of a sort of magical realism built out by this extended metaphor. And I'm someone who, when at a loss, one of my earliest mentors told me that when it comes to metaphor, if your idea is to run it through a whole poem, sometimes you just have to leap, and then while in the air, something will appear to catch you, and you can extend it further and further. And there's such a certainty in Riley's extension of the metaphor through that poem. But as someone who knows how that goes, I can still feel him leaping towards the unknown extension of that metaphor and then landing on something really beautiful. And so that poem was really wonderful. And I just kind of, in a sense, it's also a love poem, which are, for me, the hardest poems to write. And so it was great to get to celebrate that one.
Let's give everybody a round of applause again for those wonderful poems. I wanted to just open it up to the audience to see if anybody had any questions just about the anthology that, or anything related to the poets that shared their pieces.
I'm also going to ask Merrick to consider, if I open up your poem, since you were in this book, to read your poem. I'm going to find it, and then
The first question that we have is, what advice do you give teachers that are afraid to teach poetry or feel like students just aren't interested? So I'll let PK take that one on.
All right.
I'll stand behind you so I don't block it.
Okay, so I was that teacher for many years. And I think something that Hanif was talking about is really it. It's about, our motto is poetically sharing our stories for however many years, 22 years now. So everybody has a story that needs telling, and it's helping young people access that story. So part of it is how to mine for that. And we have a book that's going to help you do that with a website, right? So that's one thing. And then making yourself vulnerable. So back in the late 90s, I started sharing poems that are quite embarrassing to look at the moment, but my students appreciated that. And when we go into classes, a couple of weeks ago, my good friend and colleague Andrew Brown wrote a poem and shared with the class during the freshman slam finals and made himself vulnerable. And the students for the rest of the year are going to look at him differently. And they're going to look at themselves differently, because he provided that kind of courage that the next time they share a poem, they're going to be able to go a little bit deeper as well. So that would be my suggestion, is to help them access their own story, and to do that, make yourself vulnerable and share your own story.
Yeah. I don't have much to add except to say that when I was in high school, which is getting further and further in the rearview by the hour, this just wasn't, I did not know that living poets existed, right? Like the amount of resources that were present for teaching poetry were just significantly smaller than they are now. And I don't want to, obviously teaching anything is not easy, but because there's an abundance of resources, I get to go to schools in Columbus, schools like Fort Hayes, or like Beechcroft, where I graduated from, or like Paz, and just watch teachers play videos of poems and watch students register something, right? There's something that I enjoy about the visual, touchable aspect of someone performing a poem on a stage that helped me, like when I was first getting into poems, which was way later than high school or college, that helped me decide, okay, I have a relationship with sound, and I have a relationship with visuals. And because of that, there's something here for me. And so, you know, the best examples of poetry teaching I've seen doesn't fall on the work of the teacher. I mean, the teacher does work, of course, but it's just nudging someone towards something that might be for them and then letting them kind of go, giving them the tools to kind of go and run on their own. So I say this as someone who doesn't teach at all. But so,
That's not true.
oh yeah, I guess that's not true.
That's not true.
I say this as someone who teaches rarely. Should I ask that one since I'm here already? Okay. Do you have advice to teachers on showing the importance of the investment in writing?
I would say it's really showing them success stories. Now, the beauty of this is I can talk about Steve Waddell. I can talk about Asia. I could spend the next hour and a half talking about 150 individual students who have had their lives changed because of poetry, right? So at the moment, if you're in the nascent process of this, use our website. Our website has all these impact statements about how poetry transformed people's lives. And then you'll see it in front of your eyes, and then you'll have a kid and you're like, hey, I see you have a free period, third period. Could you come talk to this class and tell them your story? So I think it kind of snowballs in that regard. And you know, Merrick will be able to speak to that when he gets begrudgingly thrown up here in a moment as well. What would you like to say? Or Steve?
I would just say, for me, poetry really kind of showed me the importance of myself. 14, 15, 16-year-olds, the most important thing in your life is going to be you, even if it's in relation to a girl, a sport, or anything like that. So I would say just giving the young people who are in the class a chance or a time to just reflect on their own lived experiences, because in school we oftentimes don't get a chance to reflect on who we are. It's always about where's X or who is this person. And I think poetry for me really gave me a chance to really look at myself and see who I was as an individual, whether I was 15 or however old I am now.
16.
I can't really add to that except to say that for me, one of the real pleasures of going in high schools, particularly Columbus City high schools, is in the kind of relatability that PK was talking about, where I can say I'm from here. I came from out where y'all are from, particularly like schools on the east side, and I am still writing about, like, we're still writing about the same things. You know, your poems are my poems, and that is, I think, enough to propel an investment in writing. To know that not only are you not alone in doing it, but that someone, you and someone who might be years apart for you, are still reaching for the same impulses.
I'm going to also mention two other resources. One, Zion Williamson, who's one of the most famous basketball players in the world. His creative writing teacher, Bill Pell, got him into poetry in a creative writing class where he's like, I'm just going to skate by. It's my senior year. I'm going to be going off to college to play basketball. And Mr. Pell convinced him to try. And if you look up Zion Williamson and poetry, you'll be able to find a video you can show your students where Zion says, you know, Mr. Pell pushed me, and now I continue to write poetry as an NBA basketball player. And then there's also a resource on our website. If you go to Levi Miller, there was a Newsy piece done his senior year. Levi was someone, and he talks about it in the video, who was getting D's and F's freshman, sophomore year. And then he won, just like Steve did, won his in-class poetry slam, made it to finals, completely changed the course of his life. It's about a 5-6 minute video that I showed to reluctant students or kids who just don't care about school. And I think it has a real big impact. So those are two free resources that I would recommend.
I would like to make it. PK keeps bringing up the poetry slams that are in class poetry slams I won. I would like to just let the record. I was robbed both times. So that's a sore spot.
You made it to finals. What are you talking about?
Which I should have won.
Okay.
Both times.
That's Iman Shumpert, the same thing. Nova Venerable beat him 3 years in a row, and he thought he was robbed. All right. Can you give an example of a moment when you watched the student find their voice because their language of choice was given value and validity? That's pretty interesting. I'm going to think on that. and see if either of you have an answer.
What's the question again?
I'll buy us a little more time. Can you give an example of a moment when you watched a young student find their voice because their language of choice was given value and validity? All right, I'll give you an example from 3-4 weeks ago. There was a kid, I won't name him because I don't have permission, but he was someone who came from a different country, speaking a different language, not an ounce of English, when he was about 8 years old. So now he's 14 or 15. Was resistant all week a month ago. He was the one kid we couldn't get to write anything until the 4th day when we did a free choice assignment with this book, where they kind of leafed through it and got to choose the prompts from the website. And he wrote a name poem, inspired in part by that section of Asia's poem, and then a poem by Micah Daniels after Patricia Smith's Should Have Been Jimmy Savannah. And on that Friday of the slam, he had one sentence written. And I sat down with him. I asked him some questions about his name. What does it mean in his home language? What does it mean in English? And so on and so forth. And suddenly he wrote, got up and shared it, was a runner-up in the slam. And the following week, his teacher stopped me in the hallway and said, blank is a different kid. He's coming up to me each day saying he wants to be a poet, and he's by far the most engaged he's been all year. How's that for an example?
How many, I don't know if everyone here is like a Columbus person who's been here for a while. Does anyone know the name Marshawn Mcgill? So we, of course, for those who know, we lost Marshawn a few years back. And what people mostly, I think, remember him for is his community work, in his activism work, and his organizing work. But Marshawn was also a singularly great poet. We both kind of stumbled upon Writing Wrongs Poetry Slam at around the same time. Difference is I was much older, well, not much older, but I was older. He was coming out of the Mosaic program, which is just like brilliantly done and is a home for so many great young poets that have come through Columbus's poetry scene. And Marshawn was kind of, it's so funny to think of this because this is so far from who he was, but he was like very shy and would always kind of get up on the mic and you could tell his writing was good, but he always kind of mumble and read off page, occasionally look up. And there was something about the space, the Writing Wrongs Poetry Slam specifically at the time was a space where you would have, it was run by William Evans, the great William Evans, and you would have this space where really young poets could come and compete against like older poets who were going to national poetry slams often. In the competition, I mean, it was real. I mean, you know, that stuff back in that era was like real, you know, like the slams were really competitive every time out. And it wasn't necessarily, and the competition was born out of care, right? It wasn't about like winning as much as it was showing out because the audience and the people you're competing against are always great. And so I got to watch Marshawn through this, become a better editor of his work, become a better writer of his work, become a better performer of his work. And one of my greatest Columbus poetry memories I have is the Writing Wrongs Grand Slam in 2015. It was at this loft. The Writing Wrongs used to be in this loft on Long Street, like literally walking distance from my house now. This was to determine who went to the National Poetry Slam. Only 4 people, 5 people, like 4 people went on all. And Marshawn had gotten into it. You know, you have to qualify as the years go. So he somehow qualified and got into it. And he drew first. He went first in the slam, which is like a bad place to be. And this thing happened where he got maybe 30 seconds into his poem and the power went out in the loft. The lights went out. And he just didn't stop reading. I remember this because he was reading from memory and he was performing from memory and the lights went out. And there was a brief, like, you know, everyone kind of panicked when the lights went out, but Marshawn got louder and got faster and got more into the performance. And I remember thinking, this is like not a kid anymore. You know, if I were performing and the lights went out, I would be like, okay, well, we had a good run. That's one of my greatest memories. And it's almost like, I might be over dramatizing the end, but I feel like the lights came on like 20 seconds after he finished. And it was just this great moment of seeing someone come full circle from where they came into the room to how they outgrew the room in a way. And that was, yeah, I miss him a lot. I'm really glad that that I got to experience his work as an organizer, but also as an artist.
I think I bought some time for Merrick, but my good friend Terry Eisel has a question for us.
Could you tell us a little bit about what sparked the idea to start spoken word and what the first year was like at Oak Park River Forest when you did it?
Sure.
How
So,
that compares to how it is today.
okay. So in 1998, I had a student named Brandon in my English class who had the lowest grade. He was a sophomore, lowest grade in both my sophomore classes combined. Nice kid, could not get him to do a lick of work. And a former student named Jonathan Vaughn, I brought him in because I was terrible at teaching poetry, and he was a poet. And I said, Jonathan, please salvage this for me. And he did a lesson, and he brought up the idea of a poetry slam. And my students said, hey, can we try that? And I said, sure. So Brandon ends up winning the poetry slam, went from the lowest grade in the class to inched his way up to the top third. And the following year, my co-editor, Dan Sullivan, who's tired of me telling this story, so I'll just tell it a brief one, wasn't doing so great in English class either. Same thing, won the poetry slam and went from the lowest grade in my 2 American Lit classes to the highest grade in my 2 American Lit classes. And that's when it's like, all right, we got to do something for these guys. And other of my students who didn't feel like they belonged in the school really and didn't have a voice in the school. So we started the club in '99, and Brandon and Sully were 2 important members of the club. Back then it was just, I don't know, more visceral, I guess. It was this exciting new thing. And kids were just so excited to be able to share their voices and be heard. There was just a beautiful energy. My parents can remember they came out on a very rainy day from Columbus, Ohio, home of the Buckeyes. And we took school buses to bring the kids out, and they met us. And Gianna Baker, who was in the club, really impressed my dad. And it was just, it was such a beautiful experience for the young people and for us to witness. And today it's still a beautiful, maybe a little bit more confidence behind it because of the lineage and because so many alumni help out and have helped out over the years, that there's maybe there's a swagger early on, there's a different kind of swagger now, but it's still transforming lives in remarkable ways. I'm really proud of it and proud to see where it's going to go after I come back here. Thanks for that, Terry. Another question before Merrick.
Sorry, Eric, I'm holding up. So quick question, I haven't seen the book. You talk a lot about the tools that are resources within the classroom. And I wonder, as an elder to other people's children, how you, is the book one that you could leave in free little libraries or donate to places that would still evoke that type of lesson and legacy without the teacher experience?
Well, I'm a teacher. Nancy Brown, Dick Brown, right? We got a lot of teachers in here. So I would say the teaching component is key, but we designed it that someone could pick it up at Gramercy Bookstore and enjoy reading it and finding it quite meaningful. And I'd say I just gave a copy to my nephew Griffin, who's 11.
Go Griffin.
Go Griffin. And I'm excited to see him read through it. My mom is reading a poem or 2 a night. She's a little bit older than Griffin. So I think the general population will get a lot out of it, but I think it's a gift to teachers and students in particular. Yeah, thanks for asking that question. So serendipity, right? I was able to get an on-time flight from Chicago here in spite of all the crazy weather last night. I get in, right? And I get a text when my phone comes on from a friend and the former Board of Education from Oak Park president, Jackie Moore, one of my biggest supporters over the years. And she said she's in Columbus seeing her mom, and she's with Lindsay, one of her daughters, and Merrick, her son. And they want to come to the event, but they saw it sold out. And we worked it out, and thankfully Nikki was able to put them on a wait list, and 3 tickets came up. So Merrick, his aunt and uncle, I believe, who I've not met, are here. And we didn't have, because Steve didn't turn in his poem for the book. We have a spoken word club member who isn't in here. We had the videos, and now we have Merrick. So I think we'll close out before thank yous and such from Linda Cass with Merrick reading and maybe talking a little bit, if that's okay. And we welcome Merrick. Oh, and the other serendipitous part is that on Thursday, so on Tuesday in Spoken Word Club, we used one of Hanif's poems. On Thursday in Spoken Word Club, we used a Tim Siebel's poem, another poet from the book, Eliana Geraci, and Merrick Moore Fields. And the students loved all of the poems and creative writing prompts. And I took a picture of the writing prompts, sent it to Tim Siebel's, sent it to Ellie, and sent it to Merrick, and sure enough, here he is.
I'm Merrick Moore, class of 2011, Oak Park River Forest High School. I didn't expect to come up here, but I kind of suspected it was going to happen as soon as Mr. Kahn was just like, "Oh, Merrick's here." I was just like, "Oh boy!" It's just like I stepped on the trap. I was like, "Oh!" But yeah, I'll say my piece from the anthology, and if you guys have any questions for me in terms of my writing process and stuff, ask ahead. So here we go. This is called Bird. I remember Charlie Parker. Ken Burns broadcasting bebop blues on the flat screen. My dad's ears were glued to the speakers. Cherokee was playing. A single song was subtle and somber notes. Dad heard a genius, mastering a craft created by the old band, unparalleled in the art of freestyle. But I heard different. A kindred spirit, a sad bird crooning his pain and expressing grief, singing sorrow songs, playing that depressive note that coats notes with the melancholy measure. I remember my brother telling me, "Play on, sax man," before death kissed him on the cheek in a crashing car. Last words to me were to go the distance. Play like your life was your last show. Go to heaven with a shelf full of awards, with that 1, 2, 3 into the 4. Goddamn. Lay off the blue brew. Don't pour, don't smoke. Play the track unaltered. Don't falter. Devil's asking for a dance and a chance to make bank. Twist your brain like a Rubik's Cube, so your attitude ain't all depression and anxiety. They trying me, Jordan. Help me play the blues so they understand my pain. Now, let's rewind. Mr. Parker lost his best friend in a car crash. That drive was treacherous, but told him to play on. The song of sorrow sought solace in somber notes. I know that song all too well. Everybody else told him to play on, medicate his pain with brewing dope, hope to get on that tree branch so he could sing. A bird with wings wanting to fly, but tied to a cage of music that was his own illness. He played on, bird, bit through the ropes so we could soar.
Want to talk for a second about your experience in spoken word?
Oh yeah. Spoken word was that really it did help me get through high school, basically. You know, I remember first day I was in OPRF. I originally went to a private school, and my older brother died, and I just was like, I need to get out of there. So I moved to Oak Park, or we went to Oak Park River Forest High School, and one of my friends, Jordan Allen, he's like, yeah, man, they got a spoken word club. They got a hip hop wing. You can rhyme. And yeah, me and him used to freestyle all the time. So I was he said, yeah, just ask for Mr. Kahn, go to this room number. So I went to the room number, and I was looking around, and I was just like, oh, I'm looking for Mr. Kahn. And then Mr. Kahn says, I am Mr. Kahn. It's kind of like some Star Wars, just like that. I was like, oh, okay. And yeah, it just I I think what it taught me most was just don't be afraid to just speak with your heart, but at the same time just discipline. Like it was because going there every Tuesday and Thursday just really helped me get a routine, get a schedule, and kind of just get my grades up really too, because it's like I wanted to stay there. And it was grades were still going up and down, but in the end I graduated, and it's all thanks to that, just having a safe space to just sometimes just vent. But you have people to listen, and then you hear their stories too, and those stories resonate with you, and you realize you're not alone in this world. So okay.
Please welcome back store owner, gracious host, Linda Cass.
For being with us tonight. Thank you, Peter, Steven, Hanif. This is an extraordinary anthology and such a special night. And thank you for your vision to put all these elements together. It was an exciting challenge for us. And I'm so glad that the chat is, the people online are just loving it. And we got a lot of questions from them. So that's wonderful. And I just want to thank Nikki Snyder, who's in the back room. Thank David Donahue, who's in the back room. And certainly Kamara, Asia, and Riley, and their presentations were extraordinary. And booksellers Marcy Ford and Daniel are here, and they just really, everyone loves you all being here. It's very important to us because we really just want to be part of the community. So thank you again. And also just to say real quickly, we have two wonderful poetry events coming up. On March 3rd, we have a virtual event with Todd Boss and Maggie Smith. Todd's new book, Someday the Plan of a Town. And then on March 30th, we have Linda Gregerson, who has a collection called Canopy, and she's going to be in conversation with David Baker. So we're excited. If you want to learn more about our programs, we do all kinds of different programs, and just go to our website, gramercybooksbexley.com. So thank you again for being here. We're going to have book signing over at the table. So come on over and we'll have some more informal conversation.